here just puts you a little further in the winner's bracket instead of having to battle it out in the losers. So both fantastic players here. Geovanni, Polanco making the global finals in Players Cup 1, actually, which is fantastic. As well, top 32 in Antigua regionals and finalists in 2019 as well. And a little bit of a different team here than what we've been seeing today. So we have that Indeedee and that Hatteran that pair up so well together. That Venusaur and that Torkoal also a fantastic pair with the Landorus and Urshifu to round out this team.
I'm really looking forward to seeing if the Hatterene can put in some work. Unfortunately, there's a couple things over on Sebastian's side that could be dealing with it. But Sebastian's got some experience to back him up as well. The Lima Regional is something he clearly enjoys. Top 16 in 2020 and top 8 in 2019. Sticking in Lima, managed to win a mid-season showdown there in 2020. And Linz, top 16 in 2019. So both players that have been doing well in the past couple of years at the regional level, growing into it and trying to grow even further by putting on a good show here in the Players' Cup. The Pokemon I was talking about, and the Pokemon Sierra you and I seem to be running into a whole lot today, is that Registeel. It's something that's really grown, and a lot of people picking it up for this tournament could be quite an obvious answer to something like this Hatterene. It's another Galarian Moltres, Grimmsnarl, Spectre, Regieleki, Landorus. Landorus we've seen a lot of too. So really Pokemon that seem to be working very, very well in this format.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how these teams are going to fare off against each other. That Registeel, as you said, so strong, but in the face of a Torkoal, it'll be interesting to see the amount of work it's able to put in. As well, it is going to be going up against a team with a lot of different modes. There's the Trick Room mode with that Hatteran as well. There's the Venusaur, which can really capitalize off the sun and go fast instead. So be interesting to see what adjustments are made going into this match.
Of course, and this is the first time we've seen Torkoal Venusaur. It's something that we haven't seen yet. Usually we get it way earlier, but it could be coming through in this game, and I'll be curious to see exactly what leads both of these trainers go with. The only real way to find out what leads they're going with, though, is by heading into the game and taking a look at these two, trying to start their path through winners as smoothly as possible.
Of course, and to start trying to pave that way is going to be a Grimmsnarl to start, paired up with that Spectre, facing off against the Landorus as well as that Indeedee.
The Landorus has been so impactful for players in this tournament so far, and something that they've really grown and learned how to use very efficiently. Controlling the speed with the max airstream while dealing damage is probably one of the most impactful ways to use speed control. This Grimmsnarl, though, could have something to say about it. Certainly a bunch of options that this Grimmsnarl can try and set up to either slow down the damage that's coming through or just deal with the speed, and it's not going to do any of those now.
I mean, it's a little bit difficult for the Grimmsnarl to be out with that Psychic Terrain, so just looking to repivot into the Landorus here. A nice little Intimidate attack drop on Geovanni's Landorus. Indeedee is just going to take the opportunity to go for that Follow Me to keep the Landorus nice and safe this time around, but in return is going to get taunted from this Spectre, so won't be able to do that next turn, but might not need to, as the Landorus is going to take this opportunity to start setting up with a nice Sword Stance.
These supportive Spectres have been coming through a little bit more. I know when it first entered the format, people were playing it very, very fast, very, very offensive. But now people are kind of grown, seeing it can do a little bit more, looking at it from a taunt perspective, a snarl perspective. And I think that's going to be impactful on dealing with something like this Indeedee. That said, you do spend a turn shutting down the Indeedee and nothing to try and shut down this Landorus, as the Landorus sets up a Sword Stance and could be doing a whole lot while controlling the speed. So a lot going on, a little peep in the menu at what Geovanni has to offer. The Torkoal Venusaur is there for us to enjoy, and one part of it is entering the field now.
Yeah, Indeedee taunted isn't really going to be able to do too much, and being able to swap in and potentially back out and potentially back in, it means the taunt can't get reset, and Venusaur offers a little more pressure now anyways. And this Landorus, I mean, it has the attack boost. Why is it not going to be going for this Dynamax to start offering pressure? What Sebastian was doing, bringing out the Landorus to get that attack drop, not really able to hold this Landorus back too much. But Sebastian's going to answer with the Dynamax of his own.
The Dynamax coming immediately in return, just saying, okay, I'm not going to let you do this without any kind of balance from me. And this could be another one of those games where the Landorus are just exchanging max airstreams, but Geovanni should be in the driving seat. It does have that Swords Dance boost and is going to be able to do a whole lot more. Spectre showing another one of its supportive moves. I love this. Landing a key Will-O-Wisp, but in return, it reveals the Lumberry.
Well, at least it's burning that Lumberry, but it won't have the opportunity next turn to go for the Will-O-Wisp, as a big Airstream critical hit to boost is going to come out from this Landorus. Already has the attack boost. Now it wants a speed boost as well to be setting up and taking that Spectre out. But Sebastian firing back with his own Landorus, his own max Airstream balance, as all things should be, making sure Geovanni doesn't get the opportunity to start setting up too much speed.
These are open team sheet tournaments, so Sebastian knew about that Lumberry over on the Landorus. It wasn't a big surprise or reveal for him there, and just sort of wasting the turn a little bit with the Will-O-Wisp there, just maybe trying to say, oh, I can get you again, you won't be able to knock out my Spectre next turn. But after that Swords Dance, this Landorus is just straight up able to knock it out with a max Airstream. I think if Sebastian's max Airstream had headed towards that Venusaur, we could have been in a very different position where both trainers had lost a Pokemon in a turn, but now the game's going to have to slow down a little bit, and to weather the storm, I'm going to say this Reflect is one of the better ways to do it.
I mean, Geovanni's Landorus doesn't look like it's slowing down too much as it fires off a big max Airstream. The Reflect trying to slow it down as much as it can, but still picking up a massive amount of damage. And Venusaur taking the opportunity to go for the Sleep Powder, and one of the Landorus has Lumberries, but unfortunately not Sebastian's, as it is going to be taking a little nap now.
Control of the speed, very important. Usually the Venusaur relies on the Torkoal to come in and activate the Chlorophyll ability, but knowing how impactful these Landorus can be with the max Airstreams, just knowing that it's going to be very, very fast and able to throw down. Of course, Geovanni's seen his Landorus move before Sebastian's on a couple of occasions now, so feeling confident in that being a little bit faster, knowing he'd get the second max Airstream boost onto the Venusaur and would be able to throw down the Sleep Powder before the Airstream came in retaliation.
Speaking of Airstream, firing off another one into Sebastian's Landorus, picking up some damage. Grimmsnarl is going to be taken down with a Sludge Bomb from Venusaur, not before getting the opportunity to set up a light screen, but that is now two supportive Pokemon on Sebastian's end taken out, and a max that isn't really being able to be capitalized off of, with that Landorus unfortunately going to sleep for most of it.
Sebastian's Dynamax turns limited to one being impactful. Yes, it stays on the field. Yes, it's still around. But Geovanni's was so much more dangerous. He was able to get really, really good control of the speed. Of course, he's got more Airstreams on his side, and this Venusaur has been able to come in relatively safely. I don't think it's been threatened at all, and just set up alongside those Airstreams, so not even needing the Torkoal to deal with that. Landorus knows that it's been such a focal point, and it's going to keep going with that.
Yeah, speaking of setting up, a second Swords Dance coming out, and Venusaur just going for another Sleep Powder, so this Moltres can pressure it, but it can't really do much if it's asleep, and Landorus going for another turn of sleep as well. So huge turn for Geovanni there. This Landorus is now sitting pretty at a +3, and a bunch of speed boosts to boot, and this Venusaur with the speed boost and the Sleep Powder pressure just really putting Geovanni in a commanding position this match.
Venusaur's come in. It doesn't need Torkoal to do anything. It didn't even need its Gigantamax. Geovanni very, very confident in this Landorus as he sets up the third Swords Dance and is just going to try and play the game that way. Landorus on the opposing side does finally wake up, though.
Does get the opportunity to go for a Rock Slide, and is going to be getting some chip onto the Landorus, but with the amount of sheer speed and attack this Landorus has, I mean, the Rock Slide's going to need to do a bit more than that.
Rock Slide's going to have to really put a shift in, and it's not even going to get the chance to flinch the opposing Landorus because it's moving afterwards. So Geovanni really just trying to sweep through, I think, with this final few turns of the Landorus. It's got all of its boosts, so why not just try and go with it? As long as the Moltres stays asleep, you'll be in a great position. Landorus Rock Slide, not the most accurate move and not hitting the target it wanted.
Yeah, and despite being a +5, I think, at this point, it does connect with the Landorus, unable to pick up the KO, and it is going to go down after getting critical hit. So Geovanni got all of these setup turns, going for the 2 Swords Dance in a row, but unfortunately isn't able to really quite capitalize off of all of those boosts as much as maybe wanted, especially with that miss on the Moltres.
That's absolutely brutal. If that had landed, the Moltres would have been easily felled, and it would have just been on this Landorus on Sebastian's side to try and tidy up the game. But Sebastian's doesn't get knocked out by the Rock Slide from Geovanni's side, and then manages to fire back, scoring a big critical hit to make sure that knockout came through without any help needed by the Moltres. Now the Venusaurs come back into play. Don't forget, this Landorus still has a speed boost from earlier, and without its pal Torkoal, this Venusaur's not in the same super strong, super dominant position it was a little bit earlier on. It did switch out in place of that Indeedee, so now the Venusaur's going to have to maybe wait for the Torkoal to arrive to start throwing down sleep powders again.
Of course, this Indeedee is just going to start off the turn with a Protect, want to say nice and safe, versus this Landorus Earthquake. Of course, being paired next to this Moltres, it means it can Earthquake freely without worrying about dealing damage to its own friend, and is going to be doing a lot of damage to the Venusaur. Moltres also waking up, getting the opportunity to fire off a Fiery Wrath here. Doesn't pick up the KO on the Venusaur, but does pick up a flinch instead, which is absolutely devastating here.
That's a really big pair of turns from Sebastian, getting the comeback immediately with that wake-up critical hit Rock Slide, and now being able to flinch the Venusaur, the Pokemon that could have started to cause problems, throw things back to sleep. Really, really troublesome. Venusaur needs its pal Torkoal around, and it needs it soon, I think. If that Torkoal doesn't come in, that Venusaur's just going to get attacked again, is just going to be able to get taken out by a Rock Slide or a Fiery Wrath, and really needs to do a little bit more. This Indeedee buying a little bit of time, maybe just scouting out what was going on, but waiting for something like that Torkoal to come in back into the menu from Geovanni as he sees this Venusaur has to be moving first.
Well, moving fast is going to be Torkoal. Joining the party is going to be setting off the sun. So Torkoal not wanting to pair off against a Landorus, but I mean, necessary here for this Venusaur. Get the opportunity to fire off a Sleep Powder, and it is going to connect. So that little bit of bad luck that Geovanni was receiving is starting to turn in his favor a little bit, as he does get the opportunity to be putting that Moltres to sleep. But at the cost of the Venusaur going down and the Torkoal taking a lot of damage from the Landorus.
At least the Venusaur managed to get something going in that turn. Putting that Moltres to sleep is one of the best things he can do. But it's going to be really tough because this Landorus still has its Airstream boost from earlier, feeling very, very confident in its ability to just sweep through this game. I don't know if Indeedee and Torkoal are going to be given the opportunity to play. I mean, Torkoal had to switch in, but in exchange for that, Torkoal just takes a monstrous amount of damage. So really, really, I think, struggling to find that win condition. And that Landorus not being put back to sleep there could be causing a number of problems.
Definitely. The Torkoal is going to just take the opportunity to be going for the Protect. Landorus with the Earthquake obviously will get a hit on the Indeedee, but as long as the Indeedee sticks around, which it will be, it does get the opportunity to go for an Expanding Force to try and pick up the KO on the Landorus here and shift some things back into his favor, because things were a little bit earlier, but losing that Landorus after all those boosts was unfortunate. But Sebastian's Landorus finally going down, the Reflect going down as well. Not that it will make a difference again, like with this Torkoal. And now I think Geovanni just needs to rely on a little bit of sleep turns.
Yep, this Moltres has got to stay asleep and make sure that and get knocked out by this Torkoal before it wakes up. Moltres staying asleep on this turn. It is a very, very healthy Moltres though, and Torkoal's Heat Wave, single target in the sun, still not enough. After, of course, that helping hand boost, just showing how bulky and problematic the Moltres can be, especially behind that light screen. Maybe, I think, another turn getting through. If Geovanni can get the same through this turn, we'll be able to tidy up. But the light screen being so impactful in that game, got to make sure this Moltres stays asleep though.
It's all coming down to this, but the Moltres waking up gets the opportunity to go for that Fiery Wrath, and neither of these Pokemon are going to be able to stand up to that, especially after the Berserk boost. So close. The Torkoal tried its best with that Heat Wave to be taking out the Moltres, but after all the amount of turns of sleep, it was about time for Moltres to wake up. And I mean, I was going to take that one in game one, but wow, that was a really back and forth match. I mean, is a very different outcome than I was expecting after seeing that Landorus sitting there with all the Swords Dance and like Airstream boosts.
The momentum swung so rapidly in that game. Both trainers, though, identifying Landorus as the Dynamax candidate, playing it very differently. It looked like Geovanni had it in the bag. 3 Airstream boosts, setting up 3 Swords Dances to get him to +5 in a really good position, but a little over-reliance on the sleep turns, maybe, relying on that Pokemon to stay asleep, the opposing Landorus in this case. Wasn't expecting it to wake up, and I don't think he was expecting it to land a critical hit either. And with all of those sleep turns going on, I think it's something that's important to note that kind of came to fruition at the end. The Swords Dance was needed to try and push through this Reflect, push through these light screens. I mean, not the Swords Dance, but, you know, the screens that were set up bought a lot of time for Sebastian while he was asleep. So yes, he was taking hits, but that last turn of light screen that we saw right there at the end meant he had enough in the Moltres to be able to withstand it. That was a Helping Hand Sun boosted single target heat wave from Torkoal, which is a whole lot going on. It was able to take that hit and wake up the following turn. Of course, activating the Berserk too just made it a super easy knockout for the Moltres. So a back and forth game, a lot that both trainers can learn as they head into game number 2.
Yeah, it was definitely super valuable that the Grimmsnarl didn't set up those screens till later, making sure those screens did get to have a huge impact like it did at the end of the match. But let's get into game 2 to see how Geovanni is going to be adjusting. I mean, there is a lot of very positive things that he had going for him in this game, so it'll be interesting to see if he sticks to something similar or decides to switch it up. Spectre and Landorus coming out to play on Sebastian's side, pairing off against Geovanni's Landorus and Indeedee.
The Indeedee really didn't do all that much in the first game. It took the taunt after the Follow Me, and it just bought 1 turn for the Landorus to start setting up. So might be a similar kind of situation put in place by Geovanni if he thinks that he needs the immediate showing of getting the Swords Dance set up. But overall, I think the leads are very, very solid. Both trainers know these teams rely on the Landorus, and the Landorus can put in a whole lot of work. So that's certainly something both of them can be banking on.
For sure, and I mean, this seems a little different, but the game plan's the same as we see that Follow Me with the taunt into the Indeedee, the Swords Dance from Geovanni's Landorus. But Landorus from Sebastian's end just opting to go for a U-turn instead, gets some nice amount of chip damage on the Indeedee, and gets the opportunity to be pivoting out as well, which is really nice in terms of like Intimidate too for Intimidate cycling.
Being able to bring that Intimidate in, maybe the next turn, and just immediately throw back down the Intimidate, bring Geovanni's Landorus back down to neutral, could be really, really important, and that's something he may have to think about. Do I need another Swords Dance? If he goes for another Swords Dance, could he get caught out? If he's Swords Dancing, he's not throwing down damage back towards something like the Spectrier, and we could see the Spectrier just try and work through that Lumberry with the Will-O-Wisp, and then go at it again. So the Indeedee likely forced to switch out because of that taunt is a bit of information I think Sebastian needs to start trying to take advantage of.
Definitely, especially with that Galarian Moltres on the field, can pressure that slot honestly, if Sebastian wants to, knowing that is a very likely switch. Geovanni taking the opportunity instead of Swords Dancing, not wanting to get caught out of position, taking what he can. I mean, this Landorus does still have a +1, so no switch from Sebastian's end. It means it does get to hit for a boosted attack this time around, but Sebastian going to be firing back with a max of his own.
This is not the max that I've expected from these teams. We've seen so many Dynamax Landoruses, but the Moltres saying, you know what? I'm a good Dynamax candidate too, and don't ignore me. It's very, very difficult to easily knock out the Moltres. It's even harder when its health is doubled, and of course it's even easier to activate that Berserk by making a bit of a mistake. Love this play from Spectre, calling that switch.
The taunt going into the Venusaur, making sure it can't do anything annoying after this Airstream boost from the Landorus. It is going to be taken down in return. Landorus does get a nice speed boost, but the Spectre, it put in work. It got to taunt the Indeedee and force the switch. It got to taunt this Venusaur as well. So doing what it can. Sebastian firing back with the Airstream. Instead of targeting into the Indeedee, the previous Indeedee slot though, opting to target into the Landorus.
Knowing about that switch, I think covering it with a taunt, Sebastian, it's safe to say, was confident that it was going to become the Venusaur again. and just making sure that the sleep powder shenanigans that had to be worked through in game number 1 don't have to be a factor in game number 2 here. Knowing that the Venusaur was there, it could have been hard punished with the max airstream into that slot, but getting damage down on this Landorus is rather important as well. And this Venusaur kind of struggles a little bit, I think, to really get through, and maybe just saying, well, the Venusaur's going to be able to deal with it, looking at the item, saying, I'd rather get the damage down on the Landorus. I like the Moltres as a Dynamax candidate too, and I like that the Moltres is also able to match the max airstreams. That's really important, and this has been a big factor in all the games we've seen so far today, that max airstream and speed control has been a massive, massive factor.
Being able to keep the speed in your favor is definitely a way to be putting on the pressure, be putting yourself in a commanding position for the matches. So Venusaur not being able to capitalize off of the sleep powder, swapping into the Indeedee here. Now that the Spectre is gone, the Indeedee can at least do some follow me shenanigans. And Geovanni is going to just keep on going with those airstreams, not wanting to lose the speed war, picking up some really good damage into Sebastian's Landorus. Though Giovanni's Landorus isn't neutral now, so not picking up as much as it could have, and getting some damage dealt in return as Sebastian fires off with an airstream of his own.
Just keeping those airstreams going. If your opponent uses one, you kind of got to use one yourself, and you're definitely a little bit limited. I like this call from Sebastian, though. U-turn into that slot was either going to be into the Venusaur, which doesn't really appreciate it, not super effective, but still good damage. And now really, really big damage down on this Indeedee. Very easy to pick that up a little bit later on.
Indeedee just hanging on with a little bit of HP. But the Landorus does get the opportunity to swap in for the Grimmsnarl. We did see in the last game how important those late game screens were from the Grimmsnarl. They put in a lot more work securing the win after the Moltres wasn't able to be KO'd by that heat wave. So it'll be interesting to see if he goes to be setting those up again or just keep the Intimidate cycling alive.
Intimidate cycling has been a big factor here as well, and has been doing it very, very successfully. Just making sure that, hey, I'm just going to really guarantee every single time that your Landorus isn't able to set up as crazily as it did last time. And here's the Grimmsnarl doing what it does best, could make the end game really, really tough for Geovanni.
Of course, this Landorus is going to go with that airstream, but not doing nearly as much as it would like to after that reflect goes up. Indeed, did get the opportunity to go for a follow me, so the Moltres, it does get that speed boost, it does get to keep up, but it's only hitting the Indeedee for just a couple of HP, but it does get the opportunity to at least be eliminating it from the field.
It levels up the Pokemon count too, which I think is going to be important when we come to these endgame situations when there's switching at play, the Venusaur's in the back, the Torkoal might be there. If you limit their switching options, you just have a better knowledge of what's on the board and what's available, and can make really informed decisions. So getting rid of the Indeedee, yes, it hurts that you don't get to land really big damage, of course, with something like the Max Airstream from Moltres, but at least you're getting rid of some of the Pokemon over on that side of the field. So really good Dynamax usage from both trainers, setting up those speed boosts. Of course, the Grimmsnarl has a speed boost, the Venusaur doesn't, which just kind of harkens back to game number 1. What do you do when you don't have the Venusaur with the speed boosts?
Well, Landorus knows what it wants to do, and it wants to fly, get out of harm's way, as the Galarian Moltres goes off with a Fiery Wrath. Doesn't get the flinch though, as the Venusaur gets the opportunity to be hitting another Sleep Powder into it, proving to be still a pass on the field. Spirit Break from the Grimmsnarl into the Landorus slot, of course, not going to do much as the Landorus is up safe in the sky.
Yeah, not able to connect that Spirit Break and start causing problems that way. I like that the Grimmsnarl has acknowledged this, though. The Grimmsnarl trying to cause more chaos with the Thunder Wave now the terrain has changed. Not able to do that, but the Fly, just not enough because of that early Reflect.
Yeah, losing the Swords Dance boost, the Reflect, not doing enough, but it does get enough chip with this Sludge Bomb from the Venusaur. It connects, it does knock out that Grimmsnarl, and the fact that the Grimmsnarl couldn't connect that Thunder Wave is definitely going to hurt. But at least this Landorus comes back out. It's not as healthy as it potentially could be, but it does at least get another attack drop and further be neutralizing this Landorus on Geovanni's end.
Geovanni's Landorus has been sat on the field. It's now, even after an early Swords Dance, a negative attack. It's lost the stage. That's how well Sebastian cycled through his team and has been able to play out this game. So keeping that Landorus in check. Obviously, the Venusaur, still a problem, still landing sleep powders, but not doing them quite as early as previous kind of renditions. So the Landorus has the big speed boost. I think trying to take advantage of that is rather wise, and getting it out of the way every so often with a nice consistent fly is potentially just the play to buy some turns.
Of course, so it's going to fly up high yet again. Moltres, though, waking up, not taking nearly as long as the nap as it did last game, and firing off a Fiery Wrath to just keep consistently chipping this Venusaur down, but no flinch yet again. So it fires back with a Sludge Bomb. Landorus firing off an Earthquake of its own. I mean, the Landorus is up safe in the sky, but it's not that it would have mattered. It wouldn't connect anyways. The Venusaur was the target, and the Venusaur is going to go down.
The Venusaur is exactly what he wants to get rid of, and this puts Geovanni in this really awkward position where you've got Torkoal, but you're not giving a boost to Venusaur, which, while Torkoal is a fine Pokemon on its own, you know, bringing the sun, being able to set up extra damage for itself is really, really cool. It's kind of there to partner up with the Venusaur, and without the Venusaur that just went down the last turn, Torkoal's job's a little bit limited, and it's always going to be moving last. It doesn't have any of these lovely speed boosts that have been going around, so it's also facing down the potential Earthquake from the Landorus, and Sebastian left with that potent pairing that last time managed to clean up the game for him.
The biggest threat on the field, though, to this Torkoal, Sebastian's Landorus, is taken down with the fly. Critical hit to boot. The Torkoal is safe from this Fiery Wrath, and it's going to be safe from the Landorus. And Landorus on Geovanni's end, hanging on with just 2 HP. So this is a 2v1, and this Landorus, despite the attack drop, still has all of the speed, and the Torkoal has all of its health.
Now, that critical hit landing on the fly, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that may have been very, very impactful on making sure that that knockout came through, because the attack drops have been so well put in place by Sebastian, making sure that that early Swords Dance wasn't relevant. Just getting rid of that, so wise. This Landorus keeps spending time away from attacks too, which really kind of tough to be played around. And this Moltres is going to be asked a whole lot of it. Of course, the Fiery Wrath does hurt, but it's going to have to take a couple of attacks for its troubles. Yeah, I don't see this one really going much further. That Heat Wave doing a whole lot of damage. No Light Screen this time around from the Grimmsnarl.
Yeah, Fiery Wrath hurts, but Heat Wave hurting more, especially with the sun. Grimmsnarl only have the opportunity to set up the Reflect, and maybe that would have made a difference if not for the critical hit from Geovanni's Landorus, but unfortunately now in this endgame, not being able to do too much. Geovanni looking to just finish up this Moltres and clean up the game, taking this to a 1-1.
Torkoal proved me wrong. I said it was only there to help out Venusaur, but it was actually there to deal the requisite amount of damage to let that Landorus tidy it up with the fly. So good job, Torkoal. You're going to be getting another chance in game number 3, where Geovanni's going to be looking to swing the momentum, use that momentum he picked up in that last game to take this set in the 3rd game. I think really well played by both trainers, but that fly critical hit, you know, really important in dealing with that Landorus, and without that follow-up Earthquake, it just was too much for Moltres to do, even with the Fiery Wrath, even with the Berserk boost, which, yeah, it managed to get it, but it was just too late.
Yeah, don't you dare disrespect the Fire Turtle. I mean, it doesn't want to face off against the Landorus, but as soon as it's taken out, it's just free to be cleaning up the game that it just failed to the first time around. But 1-1 set, that means this is going to a game 3 for these two players, so let's get into it.
It really could be anyone's set as well. I think both trainers figured out a lot of things about each other's teams. They're trying to learn around it and sticking with the same lead from game number 2 and consistent leads across the board from the side of Geovanni. So Intimidate's being exchanged a little bit. This Landorus on Geovanni's side is moving first pretty consistently, activating its ability first. So a lot going on, and let's see if there's going to be some changes to the good old Follow Me, Taunt, Swords Dance, and then something from Sebastian's side.
Of course, but I mean, it's been a pretty reliable starting point for these players, so be interesting to see if they stick to the tried and true or if they try to swap it up. And of course, we get a little peek into Geovanni's mind here. eyeing up that Sword Stance again. I mean, considering he went for 3 Sword Stance in the first game, not too much of a stranger to that move or any of the effects of wanting to set up.
It's the same opening gambit from Geovanni, just starting it off, clearly confident in the way that plays, and how his Landorus actually does a lot more and requires a little more attention after the Sword Stance. But this is looking eerily familiar.
Yeah, we've definitely read this one before. Sword Stance, follow me, taunt, and now we saw the U-turn last time around, and we are going to be seeing it again. That same consistent damage on this Indeedee, the same consistent switch out into potentially, if this is like the last time around, into that Moltres in the back. And
Let's see,
here
there
it
is. It's a full-on run back. Maybe Sebastian realizing the critical hit was the only thing that made a difference there, and he was actually putting himself in a winning position. So just looking to kind of try and play through that whole game again. Might be able to make some adjustments if he can call exactly what's going to happen with some of the choices on Geovanni's side. But guess what? It's time, once again, as soon as you got your Sword Stance, get going with your Dynamax.
Of course, but notably too this time around, no switch out from the Indeedee. In the past games, that's been swapping out into the Venusaur, resetting that taunt, being able to have the Indeedee do what it wants to do and be supporting with follow me's and stuff. But it's going to stick around for this time around. Sebastian, of course, not one to be left behind. That Moltres is coming into play. It put so much work in the first game. I'm not too surprised to see it this time around. And the Landorus is like the last game as well, was so good with the Intimidate and cycling. You don't really want to lose that.
No, you want to be able to keep that one going. Spectre, though, once again, oh, it's fallen for it. It's gone for the Indeedee, which already sat on the field expecting the switch out there. So Sebastian giving up that Spectre for free.
Fantastic. Critical hit as well. Going into the Spectre, not that it would have mattered. We've seen in the last games that does enough, but that Indeedee sticking around, and I mean, the Indeedee can't really do too much, do anything with that expanding force, but being able to eat up that taunt and keep that slot safe and to keep the Venusaur slate is just so good. But that Moltres will just take the opportunity to go for a max airstream to keep up. But I mean, that was a really big switch up on this turn from Geovanni.
Yeah, Geovanni kind of calling the bluff, I think, there of Sebastian, knowing that he throws a second taunt in that slot in the previous game, just saying, you know what, that you can do that, that's absolutely fine. I'm just going to leave the Indeedee in. You're not going to target it because you want to taunt it, so you're not going to do any damage to it. I'll leave Indeedee in, and maybe, if you switch anything up, I can catch it with the expanding force. If you switch up something like the Spectre, so really kind of smart play there. Of course, it doesn't get them any damage down on the Moltres, but it is putting itself in a position to just sit there and buy a little bit of time.
Of course, that Landorus swapping into the Grimmsnarl, which is going to be eating up this max airstream, dealing a lot, but at least the Grimmsnarl will have the opportunity, if want next turn, to be setting up those oh so important screens. Indeedee, again, not going to be able to do too much. And Sebastian realizing that as well, just going for the opportunity to hit yet again into this Landorus, just be dealing that consistent damage to be bringing it down to a more bearable amount. And Indeedee trying its best, expanding force, but at this point, I think just being on the field for the last 2 turns was just valuable enough. It didn't really need to do too much else.
The Indeedee's just trying, and the Indeedee's kind of being an annoying little distraction over on the other side. It's not taking damage for its troubles. It's just sitting there, and maybe something will switch it up. Maybe the Landorus will come in, it can catch it with an expanding force on the way. But it is a little concerning, I think, for Geovanni that all of these speed boosts from the max airstreams are going onto the Indeedee, and now, very wisely, mixing it up to get a speed boost on something that can take a little better advantage of the situation.
Taking advantage as well on Sebastian's end. That Grimmsnarl just making use of the Prankster and going to be setting up a Reflect before going down from this max airstream. So we saw in the last match that both of the screens would have been liked, but only one was able to be used. But Sebastian saying that Reflect was more important and opting to make that choice instead. Airstream from Sebastian's end, though, going to be fired off into the Venusaur. It does have that Coma Berry, though, to be not taking as much damage, but that's still a really big hit.
That's a really, really big hit, but not going down is important. It managed to come in, get the speed boost from the partner Landorus. And that's something, again, in these open team sheet formats you've got to consider, because, would the third max airstream have dealt with the Landorus on Geovanni's side? And would that have caused a different kind of endgame situation where there's only limited speed boosts in play? You know, not the full 3 speed boosts that Geovanni's Landorus does have. It does have speed boosts, but it has been intimidated, so it is a lot more manageable, I think, than previous situations.
For sure, but we did get to see how it was still a little annoying with all the attack drops last time around. The speed boost just proving to be so valuable. So Geovanni has the decision to make here, but that Venusaur, if given a Sun Boost, can actually cause some damage.
And the Venusaur here would really like to get Chlorophyll going and just make sure it's the fastest thing on the field. But to do that, you know, you have to give up your Landorus, and the Landorus is the Pokemon that received all of those max Airstream boosts. It's the fastest thing on the field by a very, very long way now. You know, I mean, the Moltres is close behind because it got 3 speed boosts as well, but you know, there's a whole lot to consider before you start switching things around here. It's really going down to the wire. Geovanni in and out of those menus.
I mean, every decision has to be very carefully considered going into these endgames, especially at a 1-1. Can't make a mistake because it will be what knocks you down. And that Landorus, despite being so fast, not sticking around after those attack drops and is going to swap for the Indeedee. Venusaur sticking around and being outsped is going down from the Fiery Wrath, and Landorus just cleaning up the Indeedee as well with a Rock Slide.
So I understand why the Landorus has to leave. It has to reset its attack. It has to try and do something there. But giving up those speed boosts just throws Moltres into the driving seat. Moltres has been on the field. You know, the Landorus is going to come back in. Yes, your attack is reset, and that is fantastic news. But you do not have the speed boost that was so important in the previous games. You know, your opponent only has them on the Moltres, but that's still a Moltres, and that Moltres is going to be in a very good position to throw out very early Fiery Wraths. Could be looking for the flinches there as well. So a lot to be asked of trying to deal with this Moltres. I know it's at full health, but you've got to try and get it with a Rock Slide, and I'm not sure if giving up those speed boosts was necessarily the right way to go about it.
Especially with the Landorus being so low on HP. Yes, Landorus on Sebastian's side did get the Intimidate attack drop, but can still do just enough with like either a Rock Slide or a Rock Slide onto the Landorus or an Earthquake into the Torkoal to really deal some serious damage paired next to this Moltres Fiery Wrath, which is going to be leading the turn. I mean, no surprise with the +3 is going to pick off the Landorus on Geovanni's end. So it's this poor Torkoal against the world. It put in so much work last game and was able to clean it up, but it's gonna have to make something happen right here, right now. It's not going to stick around past next turn, and this Heat Wave, despite a critical hit, isn't really going to do enough to make it happen.
No, the Torkoal tried but was not able to put on the same showing as it was in the first one. I think giving up your speed boost on Landorus was not the play for Geovanni, and definitely regretting that one as it comes back in. Yes, the attack's back to neutral, fantastic, but the Moltres is faster than you,